Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. We've got a great episode for you coming up. Chris Newmarker actually leads this when he spoke with the two principals at SynCardia, which is one of the pioneers in the artificial heart business, and they've made some great progress on a very promising new artificial heart that could really be something. So Chris will talk with them and learn more about the Emperor product that SynCardia is working on. Before that, Chris Newmarker and Danielle Kirsh will talk about MassDevice's new report on surgical robotics companies. They have put the report out this week. It's slick, it's complete, it's got great financing data, and it's free. You just need to click the link in the show notes or go to MassDevice.com, and you'll have all the information you'll ever need about the current state of surgical robotics. And it seems to be changing every day. So I suspect we'll be putting out more reports in the future. But don't miss this one. Again, click the link in the show notes or just go to MassDevice.com. You can't miss it. Finally, I just before I get into talking about our Device Talks events, I wanted to thank the folks at MassMedic for hosting us at the MassMedic Symposium and Gala. And it was a great one-day event in Boston, and it really afforded everyone an opportunity, I think, to get it together at a time when things are getting a little crusty, a little crunchy in the medtech world. There's a lot of pressure growing from tariffs and changes at the FDA, and then unchanges at the FDA. And it was a great to get together. As I talked with someone there, a former CEO, she noted that you want to go to conferences when things are challenging. I was worried that people might not come to conferences because things are challenging, and she said quite the opposite. Like, this is the best time to be together, and she was absolutely right. I drew a lot of strength from the MedTech folks at the MassMedic Symposium and Gala, and really walked away with some takeaways that I shared on LinkedIn. If you don't follow me there, please do. But it just reminded me, the speakers, including Brian Johnson, the president of MassMedic, just reminded folks to be proud of what you do, to communicate with each other, to keep people abreast, especially MassMedic and AdvaMed and others, as to how these changes are impacting you, to take every change in stride and show patience, to remember to be empathetic. Gabriela Brambilla, the CEO and co-founder of Alira, shared a very touching story about his son, who he was born with blue baby syndrome, which is a rare condition where an oxygen deficiency causes the baby's skin to turn blue. Very dangerous, of course, but he was saved with a medical device. And that experience gives superpowers to Gabriela Bambria's medtech career, and I think we all can draw from experiences where medtech and a medical device have either helped us or a loved one, and that's what helps us get up in the morning and keeps us moving forward, and make sure we tap into that battery of energy and strength when needed. And finally, let's all work together to find a solution. MedTech is no shortage of challenges in getting products created, designed, funded, approved for sale, covered by insurers. Every moment is a challenge, and as Brian Johnson said, that's what makes it worth doing. That it's hard. So these times may be hard, but they're absolutely worth doing. So I was really happy to be part of MassMedic's event, just to walk away with those reminders and that energy. So without any further delay, I did want to remind you that we'll be having our own events, Device Talks Boston and Device Talks Minnesota. On Device Talks Boston will be April 11th. Sorry. Device Talks Boston will be April 30th and May 1st. And Device Talks Minnesota will be June 11th. And you can go to DeviceTalks.com to find out information about both. And you can also register for our upcoming Device Talks Tuesdays, which is brought to you by Intratech. And the title of the episode is Navigating IEC 60601, 4th edition, Key Updates and Compliance Strategies. So it's a great conversation, great way to learn, and it's free, and you can watch live or on demand So we hope you'll join us there on Tuesday at 4 p.m. So without any further delay, let's get this podcast started. All right, you ready for this?
Ready. Hey there, Danielle. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. It's going well. How are you?
Doing well. So we're talking at Thursday, and Tom is at the MassMedic MedTech Symposium with our colleague Sean Hooley. So we're flying solo today. Do you miss Tom?
Of course, he always offers some insightful feedback or he always has something to add to the conversation. So, of course.
So he's missed, but he's doing some important work today at MassMedic's event, and so we're pinch hitting for him because instead of doing a Newmarker's Newsmakers, we're just going to talk really quick about the surgical robotics special report on MassDevice. But how many companies do we have on that?
About 57.
Yeah,
but
57.
More robots than that.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Multiple robots from some of these companies. These are kind of like the companies that we've covered on MassDevice in recent years, but this space is just so hot and so much going on. We were just like, we've got to have, a special report where we're like kind of take a dive and gather some information on all of these companies in this like super dynamic space. And when you were doing your research, my gosh, how much, what were some of like all the different things that we collected information on with these companies?
Yeah, so first we wanted to know what their funding stage was. So if they weren't revenue generating like Intuitive Surgical, they were either pre-seed or in some sort of a series funding round. So we have what their latest funding stage is, how much money they've raised. We've also included number of procedures and regulatory status, and of course, what the robot is and what it does and what applications it can be used for.
Yeah, and I loved how we, the companies that disclosed how much money they've raised in total over time. There are about 23 of them. We have a nice table at the beginning of the report, ranking all of those, as well as there's a few companies that are revenue generating that disclose that for their robotic systems. We have a table on that as well. I especially liked, we had like Sean did a summary of a good summary on MassDevice of a DeviceTalks Tuesday webinar, from about a month ago, where Steve Bell and Joe Mullings, who just really follow the pulse of the industry. Steve is going to be a keynote speaker at DeviceTalks Boston, April 30th to May 1st. But they were, of course, they talked about Intuitive, which has just dominated the space for decades. They talked about Medtronic and, J&J with their efforts to, step up and compete with Intuitive. But there were also like other companies they were really interested in that are trying to like get into these niches. And I love how when I look at this fundraising table, a lot of those companies are near the top there. So, the money is going after where the interest is in many cases. And people will just have to download this report to look at the table. But was there anything on that you thought was especially interesting as we got this report together?
I just really thought that the just expanding applications of surgical robotics is interesting. And now there's just so many other applications. And I think just going through all of the smaller companies, even the pre-seed ones, to see what they want to achieve, it was really interesting to me just to see where the future of the industry is.
I agree. There's just so much diversity and, so many, different areas where, you could use robotic technology to hopefully, improve the outcomes of these procedures, make them less invasive. And, in some ways, what we hear a lot from, the people in this space that they really see this as kind of democratizing healthcare in a way that these systems could like kind of boost the skills of surgeons all over the country. and the world, so that certain procedures that used to have to be. And I mean, you're in Cleveland, you've got Cleveland Clinic. If I ever needed something serious, I could go down to Mayo Clinic. Our colleagues in Boston have Mass General, but I mean, there are places, there are a lot of people in the world who aren't near those types of like, super high tier health centers. So I mean, if these robots can make more procedures, accessible to them, I think that would be amazing.
Definitely. And when robotic systems can have multiple applications on one system, that really will expand the use. I think just, if you could do a heart surgery and a bariatric surgery on one system, it reduces the amount of systems they have to buy. But
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And everyone, you just heard Danielle's cat agrees. So, I mean,
yeah.
we're on the way. This is a good deal. This report, I mean, all this work we put into it, it's free. It's free for you. You just go to, massdevice.com, gated/massdevice hyphen surgical hyphen robotics hyphen special hyphen report hyphen 2025. You don't have to remember that. It's right off the homepage. Tom will include a link as well into the description for this Device Talks Weekly. But Danielle, as always, it was great discussing this, and everyone, for all things news medtech, go to massdevice.com. Keep on following us at Device Talks.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
This is Chris Newmarker. I'm editor-in-chief of MassDevice and Medical Design Outsourcing. So today, we're going to be talking with top executives at SynCardia. I mean, SynCardia's top executives think they're developing an artificial heart game changer. I mean, it's been 20 years since SynCardia received FDA approval of its artificial heart technology. It remains the only commercially approved total artificial heart. They have more than 2,000 implants, and now they're developing what they think will be a game changer for the technology, a next gen artificial heart called the Emperor that'll be fully implantable without external drivers. SynCardia recently announced its first patent in China for the Emperor device. And here on Device Talks Weekly, we have CEO Patrick Schnegelsberg and COO Matthew Schuster here to discuss these latest developments. Patrick and Matt, welcome to Device Talks.
Hey Chris, glad to be on Device Talks, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about SynCardia and the Emperor.
I know we kind of like got into this interview because I mean we're starting to see like a lot more stories around artificial heart tech, and I had a post on LinkedIn, pointing out some new developments at one of the other artificial heart companies, Bivacor, and kind of like, noting too that, like I was kind of like a child of the 1980s, and I remember that was, I'd go onto the news and there'd be, stories about like all the hope that was around artificial heart tech, but, here we are. I mean, my gosh, we're all grown up basically, and we're still waiting to see this like as a widely adopted technology. But it was kind of cool because you commented on my LinkedIn post and we're like, hey Chris, we're here, we've been here for, I was like, oh yeah, you have been here, and and you're doing like really like new cool things. So I'm really glad we could like sit here and talk today about it.
Yes, this is exciting. Yeah, we have been here, and the technology that we have is just as fantastic as it's always been, and it's going to be even better, and the future is pretty exciting.
Matt, you've been with the company the longest. I mean, we could just start out, like, give us just a quick overview of SynCardia's history. It's founded in 2001, right?
That's right. Founded as SynCardia in 2001. The PMA that we've had, it's been over 20 years. It's started out with a driver, a pneumatic external driver that was the size of a washing machine. That's what you probably remember from the 80s. It since has evolved into still having external pneumatic drivers, but much smaller. We actually have a portable system called the Freedom Driver, and Patients have been taking that with them home and living their lives since, I believe it's around 2010.
14.
Wow.
14 approved, but there was 2010 that it started.
And studied. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that approval, we've continued to operate that equipment, maintain that equipment, which is no small feat, but we've prided ourselves on our on-market support, and really over 20 years, when you think about it, we've been kept this product alive and available for the people that need it.
I mean, typically with, the artificial hearts that you've had implanted, I mean, how much longer are people able, to survive with those artificial hearts?
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? Most patients are in the heart somewhere around 160, 170 days until they get transplanted. It varies a little bit. In the US, the time on the heart is a little bit shorter. Outside of the US, it's a bit longer, and that's really related to the availability of donor organs and the donor organ allocation system. But we've had a good number of patients who've been on the heart for 2 years and more. In December last year, we had actually, if we want to call it an anniversary, of one patient who's been on the SynCardia total artificial heart for 7 years.
That's amazing. 7 years that they'd be on that technology. Now, I mean, I know that we have, LVAD, technology from, Abbott out there. I mean, from your standpoint, like, what are the advantages of going totally on an artificial heart, versus, the LVAD, this idea that you have like kind of like this implantable pump that supports the heart?
Right. So, Matt, maybe you're going to take a stab at that.
Yeah.
If needed.
Sure. I would start off by saying that an LVAD is designed to just support the left side,
right,
a failing left side of the heart. And all it does is support that. So it adds a little bit of extra flow. So there are patients that's right for. I would start, I guess, by saying that from a technological perspective and a clinical perspective, you have LVAD would be right for certain patients. But there actually is some research that still needs to be done on where you would use a total artificial heart in that group, or somebody who's just having the left-sided heart failure. Now, to flip it totally the other direction, patients that have biventricular failure, both sides of the heart failing, and have, ultimately severe failure, there is no other option other than to totally replace both failing ventricles or replace the flow. So for the extremely sick patients, they have to have our artificial heart. For patients who are receiving an LVAD, there is certainly research that can be done or that needs to be done to look into at what point it would be better off to just go with the full artificial heart.
Yeah. To chime in a little bit on the message by Matt, right? It's also important to recognize that patients who do have an LVAD, many of these patients, or almost half of these patients, will develop right-sided heart failure, right? And so, to Matt's point, there is, and we don't know the secret sauce here yet, but there is a patient population with left-sided heart failure who today gets an LVAD, but might do much better if they would have gotten a SynCardia total artificial heart. So that's something.
And one thing I'm hearing here is that the SynCardia artificial heart, it sounds to me like this is mostly being used as a bridge technology. Like, let's get this in here, basically to give you a heart until we can find like a transplant heart that we can like get in you. But that's interesting about how that like half of the people with left heart failure will eventually develop both sides, because I know that they're increasingly Abbott with the LVAD technology, they're increasingly seeing this as being not just as a bridge, but as something that basically people might have for the rest of their lives. So that's very interesting. It sounds like artificial heart tech there might be an answer there, because it sounds like it might not be something you could have for the rest of your life, if, the other side of your heart.
Our goal is to have a solution, and that's really the Emperor, that effectively replaces the need for heart transplants. Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like the science fiction dream, like,
it is.
Yeah.
This is exactly what it is, right? And Matt can tell you a little bit more about the technology, but just to go a little bit deeper on the LVAD side, right? We are currently used as a bridge to transplant. We have actually fairly recently submitted to FDA a supplemental PMA to get a longer term use indication with our data. So that's in process. And I think, again, the Emperor is really our leap forward to not only eliminate the current pneumatic drivers that are required to maintain the pulsatile pumping in our heart, and that's another important feature. Matt can elaborate on that. But replace this really by a motor, make it fully implantable, and remove all sort of barriers here, mobility, quality of life that an LVAD will still have. And Matt, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the Emperor and also on the pulsatility.
Sure.
Yeah, Matt, tell us more about how you got involved in inventing the technology, and and I'm especially interested in, the energy that you need to pump blood inside the body. How can you have a system that's fully implantable?
Yeah, great question. So I would start off with saying that from a blood contact perspective, and from a moving the blood physically with 2 ventricles and 4 valves, just like your human heart would have, the SynCardia total artificial heart is absolutely amazing, elegant machine. And so the idea with Emperor was, how can we take that technology, which we have over 2,100 implants of experience with, how do we take that technology and eliminate the need for external pneumatic systems and make it fully implantable? Well, that kind of leads right into your first question, which is, power-wise, that is what we had to be obsessed with to start with. So since we started the Emperor development, it's, how can you minimize the power requirement as to make it fully implantable in the future? And the one concept that we start with is that when you have pneumatics and you're compressing air, so there's some waste in that, and then you're transferring that energy down some distance through a driveline tube or an air tube into the implant. There's a lot of wasted energy involved with that. If you can bring the power source, or the thing that does the work, directly to the implant, or directly to where you're trying to push or pump the blood, that helps efficiency right there. The next part is, from a mechanical perspective, what can you do that not only is efficient but reliable, something that will truly last through the years? And so that's where Emperor comes in, and not only do we have that patent from China that you mentioned, we also received 2 U.S. patents last year, and we have a third patent that we're working on now. And so I will just kind of cut right to the chase with where we're at with Emperor and how exciting this actually is. Our current portable system that I was just mentioning, the Freedom Driver, great working system, that operates on about 40 to 50 watts of energy, watts of power. And then we'll go all the way to physiologically the human body. The human body consumes generally about 4 watts of power to pump your blood. Our currently operating Emperor system, again, using our proven ventricles, but with this Emperor mechanical part, we are operating at 4 to 5 watts of power. So we are doing the same amount of work that our old system was doing, right about one order of magnitude less power to do it. That's the technological jump that is needed, and why we're so excited that we can actually make this thing real and fully implantable.
That's amazing that you've like driven it down to almost to like biological efficiency, and then okay, what kind of battery then do you need for that? Because I mean I know it's already challenging just to get stuff like pacemaker and ICD technology to have enough space for batteries. I mean, what kind of battery do you need to then operate this an implantable artificial heart like this?
Yeah, I would start by saying, if you look at our currently operating system that people live their life with and go around with, at a tenth of the power consumption, either that battery can be a tenth of the size of that it currently is on existing devices, or it could last 10 times as long. So with respect to fully implanting the battery, that will be one of the steps along the way. The first step will be making sure that the implant is working. You'll start with the battery technology, ultimately external at first, but then ultimately implanted and charged subcutaneously. And at 4 watts of power draw, it will be a challenge, but we certainly think we can get there.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So maybe like the initial versions, it sounds like you'll still have like some kind of external drive line, but it kind of sounds like there would still be like some real advantages to that. I mean, of just having a battery, on the outside, that you could get charged versus like an entire, pump driving system that's outside.
I think it's going to be a huge difference, right? I mean, you have not really a drive line. It'll be basically a wire that connects to the battery, which you can probably carry in a little pouch or so. It'll be far less visible, right? And your mobility and quality of life will be very different. Like with an LVAD, right? You will you have a drive line hanging out of your chest, and that'll be all gone.
Right. And I remember, we had a former LVAD patient at our DeviceTalks Boston event, 2 years ago, who was, he's talking about like when he had an LVAD. I mean, he has a, transplanted heart now, but like when he had that LVAD, it gave him so much more freedom all of a sudden. There was all these things he was able to do that he wasn't able to do before, simply because his heart was failing. And it sounds like there could be that kind of level of freedom there. I mean, your original artificial heart, as you said, there was like a washing machine you were attached to. I mean, that's going to be hard to do a lot with, attached to a washing machine. But, just having a battery driver on the outside, I mean, my goodness.
Well, right now, our heart is also available with an external, we call it actually the Freedom Driver, right? That's a driver you carry around in your backpack. And as you know, well over a third of our patients, so a lot of patients get discharged, get transplanted already while they're in the hospital. The hospital driver has a module so you can move around, be ambulatory in the hospital, so you're not tied to your bed. And once you get discharged, you have the Freedom Driver. And I mean, people ride ATVs, they play basketball. I think they have fairly similar lifestyle experiences LVAD patients do. Matt,
it's fantastic. I mean,
yeah, the Freedom Driver, one interesting anecdote about that is when we came out with the Freedom Driver, it was so people jumped to do so many things. And if you think about it, it made sense. They were oftentimes not feeling well for years. And then now all of a sudden we send them home with this Freedom Driver, and we have people, horseback riding and doing all sorts of stuff that scared us on our end, but they were really trying to live their life just because they had not felt well in so long. And the SynCardia heart completely restores blood flow. So, they all of a sudden feel fantastic, and now they've got this Freedom Driver, and they're doing all sorts of scary things. So that currently exists. We've had that, as we mentioned, approved since 2014.
Yeah. Up until this point, what have been like the challenges? This sounds great. It sounds like an artificial heart with a driver, that's portable, and people can, to an extent, go back to living their lives with this technology. But why? What have been the challenges around adoption with this?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors, right? No matter what, an artificial heart, whether it's SynCardia or Bivacor, whoever makes it, right? There's a point in time where you need to actually remove the heart of a human being and replace it with a mechanical pump. And that's not, no matter how well the heart performs, that's not an easy step, and probably not your first line of defense, right?
Yeah.
and so that's a big factor. I think next is really that the understanding of where total artificial heart technology, again, be it Bivacor, be it SynCardia, be it whoever,
right,
where that is actually used in the clinical setting and most effectively and efficiently used, so that you get the best outcomes. That's the next sort of question mark, right? Really, there's still there's lots of publications, but sort of the real clinical research that figures this out is just sort of about to be done. There's no head-to-head study, what's better or what's worse. LVADs, other temporary mechanical support devices, Impella, ECMO, etc., they're used very aggressively in patients these days. They're maybe used too aggressively. They're also, when you look at the data and the patient populations they're used in, you have to be really cautious and conscious of the fact of the type of patient who gets the therapy. So we're typically used in, more than 80% of our patients are really crash and burn or otherwise severely sick patient with advanced heart failure. They in many cases will have, early stage organ failures. So they're super sick. Now, if you look at most of the other devices, LVADs, other temporary mechanical support devices, it's the other way around. 20% of these devices are used in our very sick patient population. They're used in much healthier patients. So that's one thing. So you gotta, you gotta normalize for apples to apples and oranges to oranges when you look at outcomes. Second point I'd like to make is, if you look at the use of temporary mechanical support devices versus the SynCardia total artificial heart, and look at the ultimate outcome, which is survival after heart transplant. Not the artificial heart, but the 1 year survival, 2, 3, 4 year, whatever you want to pick. But let's take the 1 year survival after heart transplant. So we know that the 1 year survival after heart transplant for patients who have been implanted with a SynCardia total artificial heart is somewhere around 73 to 75%. We also know, if we now take a population that's matched, similar patient profiles, but look at the part of the population that's been implanted with a temporary mechanical support device, again, Impella, ECMO, or whatever, the 1 year survival after transplant in that population drops to 43%.
Gotcha.
So there's still a lot of work to be done, but this data clearly indicates that when you see your patient rolling up in your office, right, or in the OR, you really have to make some, the way we currently decide on who gets what is not the right way. And we get almost twice double better outcomes than in the right patient population, again, compared to temporary mechanical support devices, which are used much more widely. So this is something we're also focusing on really creating the awareness amongst cardiologists that, look, the SynCardia total of artificial heart, as it is around 850 years of patient experience, and you really got to consider, in light of these data, let's look together and make sure that we are identifying the right patient for the right device at the right time.
And am I right thinking that, like going toward a fully implantable heart, or at least fully implantable, but, leading to a battery outside, that you're driving toward having, larger adoption, then that can kind of help you collect that data then that can show how it stacks up to like some of these other technologies for heart failure patients.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
I think adoption will grow dramatically. Adoption will also increase once we get a longer use label, right, and get out of the bridge to transplant limitation. Mm-hmm. And I think another angle we're looking at right now, we are working with we've started discussions on really doing coming up with algorithms used based on data mining, machine learning, how to identify patient populations based on our current data who would do better on one or the other device, one being SynCardia and the other would be sort of anything else. So this is work that we're working on both ends here, because we have, again, 2,100 patients, 850 years of clinical experience, right, effectively from these patients, and massive amounts of data. So we're trying to leverage that to address some of these questions.
And then, Patrick, I saw you just joined the company as CEO in 2023. I mean, tell everybody a little bit, like, how did you get into this company, and what makes you so excited about where you're leading it right now?
Well, I've been working in medical devices since 2012. I started, and these are cardiovascular, I started working for a company called Occlutech as the chief operating officer, and was basically working on structural heart defects. We made occluders, or Occlutech still, they make occluders for ASD, VSDs, PDAs, basically structural heart defects, minimally invasive devices. At Occlutech, we then started branching out into heart failure. We formed a company called Procora. I was the CEO of that, and that was an intra-atrial shunt device that continues development. That's similar to Corvia, WeWave, for heart failure patients. And then I left Occlutech, did some work on my own, and joined also another company called SynTag. SynTag is a company that was a privately held company based out of Sweden, and they develop a minimally invasively implantable left cardiac assist device. So you can kind of think of it as an LVAD that's implanted in the heart, but the mechanism is different from an LVAD, but it's basically the same a comparable concept. And I was a board member of Scandinavian Artificial Heart, and so that's how I got into the artificial heart space. Sort of from occluders to shunt devices to left cardiac support devices to being a board member of Scandinavian Heart. And then I came across, you know how it goes, somebody calls, and the investors who took over ownership of SynCardia in 2021 They brought Matt back on board in 23. They asked me to join. And so since we're here, we've basically been, building a team here that's focused on building the Emperor. And one of the compelling factors here joining SynCardia is really the deep history, the deep experience that we have with this device, and the prospect of turning this into a fully implantable, this experience and this technology into a fully implantable device, the Emperor.
It's really exciting. And I mean, at this point, how large is your team?
We have a little bit under 80 people working for the company, and we're still growing. We're our goal is, we have spent a lot of time in the past 2 years or so on making sure that we have the right structure in the organization, on heavily focusing on the Emperor, on working on some next generation drivers, and Matt can allude to that. And next step here is to start pushing sales more aggressively here in the United States. So we had a very, very small sales force. We're now in the process of growing that significantly. We're looking to go into Europe. We have a subsidiary in China that we will leverage to enter the Chinese market. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen here in 2025 and 2020.
I know over the last year or two, we've unfortunately had a few OEMs announcing layoffs. So you heard that, everybody. SynCardia's growing. Like, reach out to Patrick and his team. They're looking to hire.
Well, hold your horses. We're also growing moderately, but anybody interested in sales, call me.
Sounds like a plan. And, Matt, just to go back a little bit, I'd love to hear just a little bit more, tell a little bit more about the technological challenges you've had to overcome. We talked about the battery and the energy, but I mean, my gosh, just getting an entire pump drive inside a human body. What were some of the challenges you had to overcome to get here?
If you think about, so our system, the beat rate is a little bit faster than a human heart, so our currently approved system. And so one challenge, if you think about, is that patient that, for example, that's been on this system for 7 years, our heart would have to beat 63 million times a year, roughly. And so that patient, 7 times 63 million is how many times this thing has cycled. So not only do you have to be able to make it small enough to do all of that work inside the body, but then on top of that, it has to be extremely robust. The first major set of shoulders I'd say that we're standing on is the fact that we use our segmented polyurethane solution, something that we manufacture and formulate here. Extremely resilient. We're not changing any of that. That's the blood contacting part, the part that will actually push the blood. But then in addition to that challenge, with respect to reliability, you also have the pulsatility part of it. This is truly pulsatile. So we are moving volumes of blood rather than, say, for example, having an impeller that's changing speed to simulate pulsatility. We actually are moving a volume of blood, which means there's some type of reciprocal motion from a mechanical standpoint. That's a heck of a challenging thing as well. So what we've focused on is parts that are not sliding together, minimizing friction, and also minimizing the number of moving parts. The fewer moving parts, the higher the reliability, obviously.
Well, also one of the big challenges that's dogged this type of technology has been blood clotting. That's we've seen. I know in the LVAD space, we've seen stuff pulled off the market because of problems around that. So I suspect getting less moving parts and less blood contact that helps avoid blood clotting problems as well, right?
Well, I would say that so the experience that we have with 2,100 patients so far, that diaphragm and that kind of ventricle system, we're not changing that. So this system has been, decades in development. It's proven to work. We don't have blood clotting issues, and so we don't want to touch that. What we are touching is the way that we're actually moving it, and that's the Emperor.
Got it. So it's kind of like it's the same, like as far as like the diaphragms and that whole system for moving the blood. I mean, that's the same. It's more like you're getting that pumping drive mechanism inside the body and kind of like closer to all that device.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's
and then I am. So it sounds like with the pump drive, it was like trying to like simplify things, less parts. I kind of miniaturization. Was there like miniaturization involved as well, or?
Yeah. So part of our patents and part of what we're also working on in the future are specific kinematic mechanisms that do a really good job of doing this amount of work in a very small space. So without getting into Patrick will kill me here if I say too much. Here,
I'm listening.
The harsh reality is that we have to make it small. It has to be able to fit. We also are working closely with physicians who have experience actually implanting our heart, and we're getting really good inputs there, understanding the shape and how big we can move in certain directions and how much we can grow or shrink certain areas of the device. But all in all, just we're super excited. And we'll go from a couple hundred moving parts in a driver system down to 3 or 4 total moving parts is been quite a feat.
Yeah, I just want to just say one thing about the number of parts here, right? It's really, I mean, I've heard the argument SynCardia has a lot of parts. Well, the implant has 6 parts. Okay? 6 parts. We have the valves, 2 to the left, 2 to the right, and then for each ventricle we have our diaphragms that pump up and down. Those are the moving parts. Everything else is outside of the body. And so, yes, you still have parts, but it's serviceable and everything is, and so this is really where our sustaining engineering team comes in to make sure that we continue, making sure that our pumps operate and get upgraded as we move along. But if you compare, so this number of, and the Emperor will have like a few more because we have a motor there, but it'll be, I'd say, a magnitude below the nearest other total artificial hearts out there in terms of parts, number of parts that are actually implanted. And if you look long term, if you want to have, and I think all of us in the total artificial heart space want to have that, a implant that can be used as a alternative to a heart transplant, with maybe the Emperor will have a dozen or so full moving parts implanted. There's nothing that comes close to that, right? Yeah. Ivacor, Carmat, Scandinavian real hearts, these are all very beautiful, sophisticated devices, but much more complex. And once that's implanted, if something goes wrong, it is a catastrophic event. That also pointing to our failure rate is less than 1/10% of from 2,100 cases. So our implant has effectively, it's never good if it fails, right? But it effectively has never failed.
Fantastic. So it's really like simple is better when it's something that if it breaks, could be horrible for somebody. Well, just to wrap up, I mean, Patrick, what's next at this point? It sounds like your development is still ongoing, but I mean, what's next for SynCardia? What should we watch out for?
Well, I think we, from an R&D point of view, or looking at the Emperor, which sort of is the nucleus of this whole conversation, right? Matt has promised me that he will start. So we're still doing some refinement on the prototypes. We have a number of prototypes that are in development. There's some reliability, durability testing ongoing. The next step will be acute animals to confirm. We now with our prototypes basically can mimic cardiac output as for our sort of currently approved SynCardia total artificial heart. So basically we get cardiac output at physiological levels. We're now doing some durability testing. We'll go into acute animals to confirm that what our prototype designs do on the bench, they can do in the chest of an animal. We'll do this also in comparison to our current implant. And then we'll go down the usual medtech development path. We'll do our GLP animals, and then within 3 to 4 years, the goal here is to have a PMA supplement for the Emperor.
It's fantastic. Well, this really appreciate you sharing this story, and best wishes to you on continued development. So Patrick and Matt, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on to Device Talks.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Great to have this chat. And
fantastic.
And that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Thanks to Chris Newmarker for leading this week's interviews. Please do join us at DeviceTalks Boston on April 30th and May 1st. Please do join us at DeviceTalks Minnesota on June 11th. You can find out more information about those events and our upcoming DeviceTalks Tuesdays at DeviceTalks.com. So please register for those events. We'd love to see you there. Agendas and speakers are up, and we're adding to the lists constantly, so keep an eye on things. Numbers are looking very, very good. So thank you to everyone who has registered. Please do connect with us on LinkedIn if you haven't already, and connect with myself, connect with Chris Newmarker, connect with Danielle Kirsh, our senior editor, and connect with Kayleen Brown, our managing editor at DeviceTalk. So it'd be great to be part of your future MedTech conversations. All right. Other than that, we'd love to have you subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network, and make sure you don't miss a future episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast or our other podcasts. So go to any podcast player and push like, follow, and or subscribe, and you will never miss a future episode from DeviceTalks. So that's it, folks. Thanks again for being part of this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. We're working on the next one. We'll have that to you next week, as well as other great podcast episodes. Take care, everybody.